please welcome the founder and CEO of Lifehouse Hotels, Rami Zeidan, and the Chief Growth Officer of citizenM, Ernest Lee, in conversation with Skift Senior Hospitality Editor, Sean O'Neill.
Oh, sorry, are you waiting? Oh, no.
So we've heard, we all are very familiar with like the generic global brands and how they approach hospitality. And so we have two emerging brands. We're going to find out, level set about how they're approaching guest behavior and adopting some of the trends we've been talking throughout this conference. We are taking questions from the audience, so feel free to put your questions into the app and we'll get to them. So I'd like to start, Ernest, with you with sort of a basic question of like, what kind of guest comes to citizenM?
Yeah, so we focus on a guest that we call the mobile citizen. That's actually who we named our company after. And this is somebody that really works mostly on their laptop. They travel frequently, mostly to the big cities, both business and for pleasure. And they're really driven by experience. So that can mean either art, design, food and beverage, programming. And they resonate with us and we resonate with them really because of our locations. We've got buzzy lobbies, very tech-centric, and we're very value-oriented as well.
So what has changed in customer behavior in the past couple of years? Has anything sort of you've noticed maybe appears in the booking data?
Yeah, so I think what has been most interesting for us has been something that this conference is really focused on is the theme of decentralization and distributed work and what that means for one's lifestyle when you have that flexibility. And this was always been something that we've even been interested in before the pandemic because we're doing a big project with one of the big tech companies. I think Skift has written about it, and we would always comment on how
this is the Facebook building a hotel on the campus at Facebook. Okay.
So we'd always comment on how their teams were organized. Right? They'd have people on the same team, and they'd have members of the team all located in different cities, and they'd all fly in to meet each other, once a month or once every other month. And some of them weren't even employees of the company, but they were actually contractors. But it felt like they were part of the same team. And we're like, oh, that's sort of interesting. And you look now, and you're like, oh, was that a little bit of a glimpse to the future of how work is going to be organized? And what does that mean for hotels when work is no longer centered around the office? And so for us, we're wondering, hey, what other use cases and what other application and role does hotel fit when maybe the only physical place that's consistent that people get to see each other and their colleagues and their clients is the hotel itself? And could we be sort of a pseudo workplace for this newfound flexibility?
Okay, maybe if we can bring up some imagery of the citizenM experience. So just to build on that a little bit, Ernest, with our company, we've stated several citizenMs as part of our team meetings over the past few years. And it was noticeable that in the lobby pre-pandemic, you really had that sense of locals coming in and using it as like a co-working space to a certain extent. How do you sort of see anything changing as you come out of the pandemic, just building on your points of decentralization, taking advantage of your assets?
Yeah, so one of the things, once we had enough time to really focus on how to organize the business coming out, was we immediately went to our customer base, right? And we asked ourselves, okay, who are these people that we felt were going to be the earliest adopters of flexible work? And we immediately said, okay, SMEs, right? And we spent countless hours trying to interview them, feedback forums, focus groups, really to understand, okay, what is the role in travel in this new lifestyle? And what are you looking for?
And this is small to medium enterprises, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the takeaways that we got were, one, what they're really focused on is predictability. And two, they're really focused on value. And so one of the ways that we've responded to that is we recently rolled out a new membership program. It's called My citizenM Plus. Mm-hmm. And the concept is very simple, where you pay $12 a month, and in return, you get 10% off our best rates, you get a free room upgrade, free late checkout, and you get a room availability guaranteed. And so the feeling that we're trying to to create is almost one where you're like a regular at your favorite restaurant, right? The the restaurant's busy, but the hostess will fit you in, get a table for you. The chef will, send out some dishes on the house, and there's this feeling of belonging. There's a feeling of familiar. There's a feeling of routine that we felt was very important for this new type of mindset.
So about how many members do you have in the subscription program?
So we've been live for about 6 weeks, minimal marketing, but we're trending and closing in on 2,000 so far.
And you've only been sort of marketing to people within your own list, I suppose.
Mostly, yeah.
And you said $12 a month, but I guess it's a minimum 1-year contract, or?
Commitment of 1 year.
Okay. And the perks, again, so it's like 10% off, you said? Or?
Yeah, so 10% off, free room upgrade, free late checkout, and guaranteed room availability.
And US only, or?
Nope, global.
Okay.
Yeah, and the math that we're trying to get to is, okay, somebody's going to sign up and say, when do I break even on this? And we want to basically get to a 2-night turnaround.
A 2-night turnaround would be break even?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Rami, thanks for your patience. Bring you into the conversation here. What kind of guest stays at a Lifehouse?
Yeah, so by way of background, we have a brand and we also have a management company. So we have 55 properties, and only a subsection of that is actually the Lifehouse brand. Okay. So we cater to every customer. We've got a hyper luxury hotel that's $2,000 a night, and we've got a motel in Kansas that's $100 a night. So what we've tried to do, the problem we're trying to solve, is not necessarily replicate the exact same thing everywhere, which we try to do on the brand a little bit, but on the management side, it's like figuring out utility function and then putting different coefficients on those variables for every hotel, so we can try to understand what is the maximizing utility function for each guest at each property at scale. And that's kind of a different challenge, I think. And the question we ask ourselves is less, what does a guest want, but maybe more a high resolution question of what does a guest, what makes sense to give them? And we focus on small hotels, and it usually makes sense not to give them very much. And so what we're trying to do is invest in scalable strategies of giving guests the same things at the different tiers. So in a luxury hotel, we've invested in some luxury software components and service elements, and kind of at the lower tier, kind of a similar equation.
Okay. We have a slide about the ethos at Lifehouse we can bring up, but tell us a bit to this. You have your pillars. How does this guide you?
This is for our brand, our consumer brand. So what we've tried to do with the consumer brand is, unlike citizenM, we don't own our real estate, and so we have to respond to the real estate. And I think kind of the utility function for our Lifehouse brand is oriented around, value is certainly a big variable in that equation, and local roots is another, and that kind of jargon has been overused and abused pretty dramatically. And so what we try to do is respond to the real estate and tell a unique story. I think our fundamental thesis with the brand is the best boutique hotels are, designed by an individual that's kind of told an authentic, true story. And how do you scale that? That's a difficult thing to scale. So what we've tried to do is design a system and a creative process that kind of allows us to develop these new, unique concepts for every hotel and still have that predictability and value pillars that the customers rely on.
So let's nerd out and build on that, because I see people were taking pictures of your slides. So if we could go back to the previous one of the wild card. So how do you put structure around identifying a property's personality, let's say?
Yeah, so we have this saying that research is what differentiates the dilettante from the artist. And dilettante, for those that don't know, is like a poser, someone that pretends to be an expert in the arts, but isn't really and doesn't put the effort to do it. So it starts with research. So we go into every project and we start with a couple weeks of research. Our design team does it. I think if you look at the boutique hotels that have succeeded in the marketplace, it's designed around a person, Ian Schrager, Andre Balazs, you name it, and that doesn't scale. And so what we've tried to do is kind of build a formula that's like research this, and then come up and design a kind of what we call a protagonist, design an individual, and kind of
it's like a fictional character kind of like thing?
Exactly. So we kind of think of ourselves like screenwriters in character development, and our design team kind of becomes these method actors to kind of say, okay, like, let me really empathize with this character so I don't have to like have the exact same product in every hotel, but I know that this is a true thing if I use this material there and hire this person, and kind of work backwards from there.
I very much want to do my Marlon Brando impersonation, but I'll spare you. So, Ernest, if we could talk a bit about, you mentioned subscriptions, and you also talked about sort of the software mindset. You talked about being inspired by Facebook. So, how does customer lifetime value, how do you learn more about the customer when they're getting engaged, these 2,000 some, so in the very early stages that have taken subscription? How does that change your view of understanding them?
Yeah, so I would say that one of the companies I think a lot of people learn from is Amazon, right? And
Amazon.
And one of the stories that we always talk about is how when Amazon rolled out free shipping only for their Amazon Prime members, critics and the analysts thought they were crazy. They were like, you're going to lose a ton of money. This is not so smart. And what they had was high conviction and a thesis that they would take one of the biggest customer friction points in e-commerce, shipping, and they would take care of it at their expense under a belief that they would be rewarded materially in customer lifetime value over the long term. And obviously we know how that's turning out for them. And what we actually think is that hotels are a little bit fundamentally backwards in approaching learning about their customers, building a relationship, and really playing the long game. In that most hotels, the customer has to first prove their worth and their value. And if that's proven, then you get incrementally better service and reward as you go along. And we're like, that's a little strange, right? We should be the ones that should first prove our value to the customer, and then we will then be rewarded by more loyalty and more revenue over the long term. And having that sort of fundamentally different sort of approach to it is one that are leaning into. We don't know if it's right or wrong, but over the long term, and we're trying to win not in 10 months, but in 10 years, we think this is one that instinctually feels better, where we can learn more about our customer preferences and really track their profile and really be able to make these decisions. What is a good short-term sacrifice over a long-term gain? And we could do that only by leaning into our customers first, making this commitment to them, and continuing to engage on that level so that we could say, okay, maybe ADR is not the best, or it's probably the most transactional type of qualifier. Maybe
ADR is average daily rate, right?
Yeah. But maybe we need to build out your profile in terms of how much you write about us, how much you promote us, how you are in terms of engaging with our app, what type of occupation you are, and really being able to build out a complete profile so that we could evaluate customer lifetime value over many, many years.
So what I'm hearing from that is the traditional hotel industry will look at metrics that may be lagging to a certain extent, like average daily rate, and you're, by keying in on some of these other metrics, like are they doing word of mouth on social media or something, that gives you more sense of engagement. You're looking at other next generation metrics.
I wouldn't say lagging, but incomplete.
Incomplete. Okay.
We feel that there's much more of a robust evaluation criteria that is warranted if you're really trying to play this long game.
Okay. So Rami, yesterday we had the CEO of Kayak, Steve Hafner. His company's an investor in Lifehouse. He talked up your book, said you're the greatest thing since Wonder Bread. But I'm wondering, does the world really need Lifehouse? Because for more than a decade we've had soft brands, and they've been trying to tackle sort of a similar one slice of the problem that you were talking about earlier, which is you have this sort of idiosyncratic inventory and trying to put some brand consistency around it, trying to do that at its scale. So what is Lifehouse bringing to the table that's different?
Yeah, so we really aren't a brand. We have a brand, but we're really an operator, and we use software to try to be the best operator. And really the goal of an operator is to maximize the risk-adjusted return for the real estate investor. And real estate owners primarily are interested in some financial return on their real estate investment. And so we're trying to solve the problem, particularly with small independent hotels that are underserved by sophistication in many ways, of maximizing that profitability equation. Sometimes hotels need a complete repositioning, and that requires a brand. And so we've built a brand to solve that problem. We're launching a 3-star brand because there's a lot of hotels that don't have public space or food and beverage areas, and there should be a solution for that. And so our fundamental approach is maximize profitability and the reliability of those profits for hotels, and software is the huge competitive advantage there. So we don't do that kind of sexy stuff on the consumer side, but on the back of house side, we're getting rid of finance, accounting, revenue management across the board so that the people on the property, regardless of what the property's brand is, can focus on what they're good at, which is delivering a guest experience or cleaning rooms, what have you. So I think we should exist, to answer your question. and I think the approach is more of a B2B solution than a B2C solution.
Okay. How does that change hiring for you when you have this tech?
So I think what you're getting at is, I think, somewhat of a public statement that we don't hire from the hotel industry. I think experience is kind of a substitute for a really good process or system. And that system can be a technical skill that requires a lot of training, or it can be the absence of a checklist. And so if you invest in designing really good systems, then experience becomes ever less relevant. Revenue management is not what it used to be at all. I like to think we have the best revenue management team and product in the industry, for footnotes to small independent hotels. And it's led by a 27-year-old data scientist. Nobody on our revenue management team has ever worked in the hotel industry. And experience in revenue management isn't that valuable there. And so our fundamental thesis is design systems that enable human beings to be ever more productive with ever less training. And especially in small hotels where you can't afford to rely on expensive human capital or people, you want to design a system where you can pull someone off the street and put them in and say, hey, you can be really productive with our tools and systems. That can be as sophisticated as a checklist or as advanced as a complex logic, algorithm, AI, et cetera.
I feel like this is one of the light themes of the conference that's been a bit of surprise that's bubbled up is about talent. And we heard this from Amber, head of the Standard last night, is hiring for talent that is not the traditional approach of what you expect for hospitality. And citizenM has done this for some years. It almost seems like you're auditioning for a TV show in some ways, the interview process. Is that right?
Yeah. So we call them casting days.
Casting gigs?
Yeah. And basically it's has always been not in response to shortages in the service industry in terms of staff, but more because we felt that the main criteria for being hired at a citizenM was that you were just nice, right? You had empathy, you were kind, right? We felt that that was the central point of distinction between people that were hospitable and people who weren't hospitable. And where we would invest is all the training and effort to get you into from a technical skill standpoint, from nothing to something that's, very serviceable behind a bar or behind a coffee machine. And what that allows us to do is really focus in industries and areas with really a lot of hidden talent, and hopefully it will continue to work for us. Although, there seems to be a staffing shortage everywhere these days.
There was someone here was a representative of one of the major consumer brands was saying they like this idea of sort of trying to marry AI with EQ, of emotional quotient. So in terms of hiring, you are a chief growth officer, and that's not a traditional role in the hospitality sector. Mm-hmm. For other hospitality leaders here, why should they hire like a chief growth officer? It's sort of like it's like a SaaS business kind of concept, right?
Yeah. So this was a new position for me. I previously used to oversee development and investment for citizenM for the past 6 years. And where the focus really came from is taking this new role was inspiration from tech and SaaS companies that have really tried to create bridges between departments and areas that are traditionally siloed, right? So how do you create a central cog between product, sales, marketing, brand, finance? And while doing that, you also have people that are managing these teams that are always focused on running the business, and then also are responsible for the strategic plan. And so how do you also create a little bit more focus and discipline in terms of what is not just happening today, but also tomorrow? And and obviously I'm biased. Otherwise, if I didn't think it was a good idea, I'd be out of the job. But I think this is something that hospitality companies should really sort of entertain. Is a role like this that really tries to marry and have an end-to-end perspective, and always constantly be focused on what the opportunities are and how to grow over the long term, and not just focused on your quarterly budget and your annual budgets.
And Rami, do you feel like, given your sort of structure as a company, you have a structural advantage in competing with some of the existing brands that have those soft brands and are in the market?
Again, I really don't want to pigeonhole us into just a brand, but
but as a management operator,
I think
white label.
I think what's unique about us is we have capital to invest in the previous question you asked me, which is like, to build a system that's better than experience requires an investment. And it really makes no sense for independent hotels to invest because it's costly. We're I think well capitalized to solve those problems for scale, and I think that's the fundamental problem I think with small independent hotels is it's such a fragmented space that it doesn't make sense for anybody to invest in anything. I think that's one of the interesting things about our Kayak partnership is Kayak is really well positioned to solve a problem at scale because they're one of the best travel tech companies in the world and have access to all these hotels. So yes, I think we're well positioned to do that and have unique positions within our company.
And so you have a software as a service business, and how big of a proportion of that is of the whole?
It's small today, less than 10%, but we just launched it earlier this year. I think our approach is how do we help hotel owners, and we launched our revenue management system and started selling that to third-party hotels because there were some owners of kind of owner-operated hotels that were like, yeah, it's kind of like our baby and we don't want to let go, so we'd love to use your software. And so that was the rationale for doing it versus let's just build SaaS because that's a good multiple right now.
Okay, so it's more a la carte was the demand.
Yeah, so we have the brand, we have the management alone, we have the software, we actually develop and design hotels as well. Our view is like real estate owners should kind of stick to their guns of deploying capital, and they want one partner to do everything for them. And maybe it doesn't get the tech multiple that everybody is hoping for, but it's a really good value proposition to hotel owners.
Okay. So Ernest, a question from the audience. What is your unique selling point at citizenM? How do you make sure that you have guest loyalty and retention?
Yeah, so I think our biggest unique selling point is that we are filling in a white space within urban hotels.
Urban hotels.
Yeah, so, and also other hotels, but we play in a category that we call affordable luxury, right? Which is basically accessing a high design, high experience hotel, but at an accessible price point. And that allows us to, compete with people who are, staying at more affordable hotels, but are looking for that experience, and also people that are staying at high experience hotels, but are looking for a better price. And from a loyalty standpoint, obviously some of our ambition and leaning into subscription is allowing us to be a little bit more top of mind for folks, but focusing really on the value proposition. So making sure that you're getting a lot for your money. So you're getting a great location, you're getting great service, you're getting a very fresh product all the time, as well as making sure that we always have this experience element so that there's a surprise and delight and something that's always unique in every one of your stays so that people keep on coming back.
Cool. Rami, was there anything about your new subscription product that is your message to the industry about why they should get it?
Our SaaS product?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I think small hotels are kind of a different beast than larger hotels. One of the benefits of small hotels is there's not a lot of people that you need to convince to give a new technology solution that automates jobs, because there's no job necessarily to automate. So what ends up happening is the general manager does all this work and they're really not qualified to do revenue management, digital marketing, pricing. They're not good leaders, like they're not trained as resource planners. And so software can actually do all this complicated stuff better than humans. But there's a lot of resistance to change in the bigger hotels because you have experienced people that are like, technology is not smarter than me. And so in small hotels, what we've tried to solve for is like full automation of functions so that the people on the property can do the things that technology can't do, whether it's clean rooms, give a smile, and then manage housekeepers and make sure they show up for work, which theoretically could be solved with software. So yeah, I think our unique approach is an automation DNA of the complicated things.
So when I listen to public company earnings for the major global hotel companies, they sort of assume that there's going to be, in the next 10 years, a huge wave of consolidation. A lot of the independents are going to flag because they're going to be able to pick them up because they can offer the brand consistency and the volume. Are you sort of saying that because of the rise of software as a service players such as yourself, that there's going to be resistance and maybe the independents will be able to hold their own more?
Well, I think the resistance is like the fee structure is tough to swallow. So my general view is not that positive on brand consolidation necessarily. And we've taken over a few branded hotels ourselves because owners are paying these egregious franchise fees and not getting the ROI on them, and they're stuck in these long-term contracts. And so I think there's been a gravitation, like if you look now, I think like the average number of touch points a consumer has before they make a booking is like 27 or something. I read it in one of your articles, so.
Must be true.
Yes. And so there's just a plethora.
My boss is laughing. That's great.
There's a plethora of information out there. I think like the TripAdvisor effect has enabled people to see the difference between a rigid brand and an independent hotel more clearly, and social media and all these things have helped consumers understand what the product is before they purchase it. And so brand loyalty, I think, declines over time, and I don't necessarily think there's consolidation of brands. I think there should be consolidation of management companies, and I think software can be a tool to enable kind of management companies to consolidate, and maybe even enable hoteliers that want to manage their hotel to be independent in doing so because the software's smart enough.
Okay, a lot of public companies need to re-rate their stocks. So Ernest, last question we'll leave with you very quickly. You're in charge of growth, so what is the growth plan for citizenM? Are you like 36 hotels? What's the pipeline?
Yeah, so we're 40 hotels, either open or under development. Big wave of hotels opening in the US this year. And so our concentration is really the big cities right now in Europe and the US. And the growth could continue to play into this thesis of what happens when there's more decentralization happening, and what happens to hotels when work becomes more flexible, and what does that mean for us? And that's something that we're obviously leaning to heavily, and something that we're very fascinated and trying to learn more about.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Ernest. Thank you, Rami. Really enjoyed this conversation.